Maria Santos had always trusted her older brother, Carlos. When he called her that scorching July morning, asking her to join him and his friends for a weekend camping trip in the Nevada desert, she didn't hesitate. At 23, Maria worked double shifts at a diner in Las Vegas, sending most of her earnings back to their sick mother in Mexico. A break from the city seemed like exactly what she needed. Carlos picked her up in a dusty pickup truck filled with camping gear, and 3 of his friends she barely knew. They introduced themselves as Jake, Tommy, and Rico. The men seemed friendly enough, joking and laughing as they drove deeper into the desert landscape. Maria sat in the back, watching the city lights fade behind them as endless sand dunes stretched ahead. The drive took them far from any main roads, past scattered Joshua trees and rocky outcroppings. Carlos explained they were heading to a special spot he'd discovered, a hidden oasis where they could camp without being disturbed. Maria felt a flutter of unease as they turned off the last paved road, but she pushed the feeling aside. Her brother had always been adventurous, and she trusted his judgment completely. After 3 hours of driving on increasingly rough terrain, they stopped at what appeared to be the middle of nowhere. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, with nothing but sand, rocks, and scrub brush extending to the horizon in every direction. The nearest town was at least 50 miles away, and there were no other campers or travelers in sight. As evening approached, the men set up camp, while Maria helped prepare dinner over a small campfire. The conversation was light and casual, but she noticed the men exchanging glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. That night, as they all gathered around the fire, Carlos became unusually quiet. The other men seemed nervous, fidgeting with their beer bottles and avoiding eye contact with Maria. Finally, Jake cleared his throat and spoke up. "Maria, we need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice serious. "Your brother owes some very dangerous people a lot of money. More money than any of us have." My. Maria's heart sank as she looked at Carlos, hoping to see confusion or denial on his face. Instead, she saw guilt and fear. He couldn't meet her eyes, as Jake continued speaking. "The only way Carlos can pay back what he owes is if he disappears for a while. But these people, they want collateral. They want to know he won't just run away and never pay them back." The horrible truth began to dawn on Maria as she realized why they had brought her so far from civilization. "Carlos," she whispered, "what did you do?" Her brother finally looked at her, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Maria. I'm so sorry. I got mixed up with the wrong people. I owe them $200,000. And if I don't pay them back, they'll kill me. They'll kill our whole family." Tommy stood up and began walking back to the truck. "They said if we leave you here, it proves Carlos is serious about paying them back. They'll give him 6 months to come up with the money." Maria jumped to her feet, panic flooding her system. "You can't leave me here. I'll die. There's nothing out here for miles." Rico shook his head sadly. "They told us to take your phone and leave you with some water. If Carlos pays them back, they'll tell us where to find you. If he doesn't—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Please, Carlos," Maria begged, grabbing her brother's arm. "Don't do this to me. I'm your sister." Carlos was sobbing now, but he gently removed her hand from his arm. "I don't have a choice. If I don't do this, they'll kill you anyway. At least this way, you have a chance." The next few minutes passed in a blur of horror. The men took Maria's phone and purse, leaving her with only the clothes on her back. They left her a single-gallon jug of water and a small bag of trail mix. As they packed up their camping gear, Maria begged and pleaded with them to reconsider, but their minds were made up. Carlos approached her one last time before getting in the truck. "I love you, Maria. I'll find a way to get the money and come back for you. I promise." "How long do you think I can survive out here?" she asked, her voice hollow with shock. "The water should last you a few days if you're careful," Jake said quietly. "Maybe someone will find you before then." They all knew it was a lie. They were in the middle of nowhere, miles from any road that saw regular traffic. The chances of someone stumbling across her were virtually zero. As the truck drove away, Maria stood frozen in disbelief, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. When the sound of the engine finally faded completely, she was left alone with only the whisper of wind across the sand and the distant howl of coyotes. The reality of her situation hit her like a physical blow. She was stranded in the desert with no shelter, minimal supplies, and no way to call for help. The temperature, which had been over 100 degrees during the day, was already dropping rapidly as night fell. Without proper clothing or shelter, she knew the cold could be just as dangerous as the heat. Maria spent that first night huddled behind a large rock, trying to stay warm and fighting off panic. She had grown up poor in a small Mexican village before moving to Las Vegas, so she wasn't completely helpless in harsh conditions. But this was different. This was a death sentence disguised as a temporary inconvenience. As dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Maria forced herself to think rationally about her situation. She had maybe 3 days' worth of water if she was extremely careful. The trail mix might last 2 days at most. Her only hope was to find help before her supplies ran out. She decided to start walking toward where she remembered seeing distant mountains on the drive-in. Mountains sometimes meant water sources, and water sources sometimes meant people. It was a long shot, but it was the only plan she could come up with. Before setting out, Maria used rocks to create an arrow pointing in the direction she was heading, just in case someone did come looking for her. She took one small sip of water and a handful of trail mix, then began the long walk that she hoped would save her life. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, an ocean of sand and stone beneath the merciless sun. Maria had no way of knowing that her journey would test every limit of human endurance, or that help would eventually come from the most unexpected source imaginable. By the end of the first day walking, Maria's lips were already cracked and bleeding. The desert sun was relentless, beating down on her exposed skin, despite her attempts to cover her head with her shirt. She had learned to take tiny sips of water every hour. But even being extremely careful, she could see her supply dwindling rapidly. Her feet, in worn canvas shoes never meant for hiking, were developing painful blisters. The rocky desert floor was uneven and treacherous, forcing her to watch every step to avoid twisting an ankle. She had fallen twice, scraping her palms and knees on sharp stones. When night fell again, the temperature dropped dramatically. Maria found shelter in a small cave, formed by overhanging rocks. But without proper clothing, she shivered through the long hours until dawn. She discovered that desert survival meant fighting two enemies, the scorching heat of day and the bitter cold of night. On the second day, Maria's water was nearly gone. She had seen no signs of civilization, no aircraft overhead, no other people. The mountains she was walking toward seemed no closer than when she had started. Desperation began to creep in as she realized how vast the desert truly was. That afternoon, she spotted something that gave her a spark of hope, a small cluster of barrel cacti. She remembered reading somewhere that cactus could provide water in emergencies. Using a sharp rock, she carefully cut into one of the cacti and managed to extract a small amount of bitter liquid. It wasn't much, but it might buy her another day. Maria also began looking for insects and small reptiles. The thought of eating bugs disgusted her, but survival instinct was taking over. She caught and ate several ants and a small lizard she managed to trap under a rock. The protein gave her a tiny boost of energy. On the third day, her original water supply was completely gone. She was surviving on cactus water and morning dew she collected on her shirt. Her body was beginning to shut down. She could feel herself becoming weaker with each step, and her thinking was starting to become cloudy. But Maria refused to give up. Something deep inside her, perhaps inherited from generations of ancestors who had survived their own hardships, kept pushing her forward. She thought of her mother back in Mexico, waiting for the money Maria sent each month. She thought of all the dreams she still wanted to achieve. She would not die in this desert. Meanwhile, 200 miles away at a military training facility, Navy SEAL Marcus Chen was leading his team through their own grueling desert survival exercise. Marcus had been a SEAL for 8 years, and this particular training program was designed to push even experienced operators to their absolute limits. His team of 6 men had been dropped in the desert with minimal supplies 3 days ago. They were supposed to navigate to a pickup point 50 miles away while evading mock enemy patrols. It was the kind of training that separated the truly elite from everyone else. Marcus had grown up in San Francisco to immigrant parents who had instilled in him the values of hard work and never giving up. Those values had carried him through SEAL training and multiple combat deployments. Even now, exhausted and dehydrated from 3 days in the desert, he maintained the mental toughness that made him a natural leader. On their 4th day of training, Marcus and his team were moving through a particularly remote section of desert when one of his men, Rodriguez, spotted something unusual through his binoculars. "Sir, I think I see someone moving out there," Rodriguez reported, pointing toward a distant ridge. Marcus took the binoculars and scanned the area carefully. At first, he saw nothing but rocks and sand. Then, just as he was about to hand the binoculars back, he caught sight of a small figure stumbling between 2 large boulders. "That's definitely a person," Marcus confirmed. "And they're in trouble." The figure was moving erratically, clearly struggling. Even from a distance, Marcus could tell this person was in severe distress. There should not have been any civilians in this remote training area, which meant someone was lost and probably dying. Marcus quickly called his team together. "We have a situation. There's a civilian out there who appears to be in serious trouble. Rodriguez and Johnson, you continue toward the objective and radio for medical evacuation. The rest of us are going to render aid." "Sir, what about the training exercise?" one of his men asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "The exercise is secondary. We have a real mission now." The team split up, with Marcus leading 3 men toward the distant figure, while the others continued toward their original objective to call for help. Moving as quickly as the desert terrain allowed, it took them nearly an hour to reach the area where they had spotted the person. They found Maria collapsed behind a cluster of rocks, barely conscious and severely dehydrated. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin was burned and blistered, and she was mumbling incoherently. Marcus immediately recognized the signs of severe heat exhaustion and dehydration. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Marcus said gently, kneeling beside her. "We're United States Navy. You're going to be okay." Maria's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she thought she was hallucinating. The face looking down at her was kind, but concerned, and the man was wearing desert camouflage. Behind him, she could see 3 other men in military gear. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's exactly what we're going to do," Marcus assured her. "What's your name?" "Maria Santos," she managed to say. Marcus immediately began treating her for dehydration while one of his men radioed for emergency medical evacuation. They gave her small sips of water and electrolyte solution, careful not to give her too much too quickly, which could make her condition worse. "Maria, how long have you been out here?" Marcus asked, as he checked her pulse and breathing. 4 days, she said weakly. "My brother. They left me here." Marcus exchanged glances with his team members. Someone had deliberately abandoned this young woman in the desert. As a SEAL, Marcus had seen plenty of evil in the world, but the callousness of leaving someone to die in the desert still shocked him. "Well, you're safe now," Marcus told her. While they waited for the helicopter evacuation, Marcus and his team did everything they could to stabilize Maria's condition. They erected a small shade shelter and continued giving her careful amounts of water. Marcus found himself impressed by her strength. After 4 days in the desert with virtually no supplies, many people would have died. The fact that she was still alive and conscious showed incredible determination. "You must be pretty tough," Marcus told her as they waited for the helicopter. 4 days out here with no preparation is, well, it's incredible that you survived." Maria managed a weak smile. "I couldn't give up. My family needs me. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. Family had always been his own source of strength during the most difficult moments of his military career. This young woman's love for her family had literally kept her alive in impossible circumstances. The sound of helicopter rotors finally echoed across the desert as the medical evacuation team arrived. As they prepared to load Maria onto a stretcher, she grabbed Marcus's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "Just doing our job," Marcus replied. But he knew this rescue was different from anything he had experienced before. Something about Maria's courage and determination had deeply affected him. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying Maria toward medical care and safety, Marcus watched until it disappeared from sight. He had no idea that this encounter would change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Maria spent 5 days in the hospital recovering from severe dehydration, malnutrition, and exposure. Her doctors called her survival miraculous. Most people wouldn't have lasted 2 days in the conditions she endured, but somehow she had pushed through 4 days and was walking when the SEALs found her. During her recovery, police detectives interviewed Maria about what had happened. She told them everything about Carlos and his friends abandoning her in the desert. The detectives were shocked by the cruelty of the crime and immediately began investigating. Within 48 hours, they had arrested Carlos, Jake, Tommy, and Rico. All 4 men confessed when confronted with the evidence. Carlos broke down completely, claiming he never thought his sister would actually die in the desert. He had convinced himself that someone would find her quickly. The investigation revealed the full scope of Carlos's troubles. He had indeed borrowed money from dangerous criminals to fund a failed drug-dealing operation. When the business collapsed, he found himself owing $200,000 to people who solved their problems with violence. The loan sharks had demanded collateral to ensure Carlos wouldn't simply disappear, and they had suggested using his sister. But something unexpected happened during the police investigation. The criminals who had demanded Maria's abandonment made a crucial mistake. When detectives traced the money trail and phone records, they uncovered an entire criminal network. Within weeks, law enforcement had arrested 15 people involved in drug trafficking, money laundering, and extortion. Maria's survival had inadvertently brought down a criminal organization that had operated for years without consequence. Sometimes, the most terrible experiences lead to outcomes that nobody could have predicted. While Maria was still in the hospital, Marcus Chen came to visit her. He was between training exercises and wanted to check on the woman his team had rescued. When he walked into her hospital room, Maria immediately recognized his voice. "You saved my life," she said, tears streaming down her face. Marcus sat down beside her bed. "You saved your own life. We just happened to be in the right place at the right time. What you did out there, surviving 4 days in those conditions, that's something most people couldn't do." They talked for hours that day. Maria told Marcus about her life, her dreams of eventually becoming a nurse, and her family back in Mexico. Marcus shared stories of his own family and his experiences as a SEAL. Despite coming from completely different backgrounds, they discovered they had similar values and perspectives on life. Marcus was amazed by Maria's lack of bitterness. Despite being betrayed by her own brother and left to die, she wasn't consumed with anger or hatred. She was hurt and disappointed. But she was focused on moving forward with her life, rather than dwelling on the past. "How do you do it?" Marcus asked. "How do you not hate them for what they did to you?" Maria thought carefully before answering. "Hate would just poison my own heart. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. I choose to focus on the fact that I survived, that good people like you exist in the world, and that I have a second chance at life." Marcus had served in combat zones around the world and had seen incredible acts of courage under fire. But he had never met anyone who displayed the kind of moral courage that Maria showed every day simply by choosing forgiveness over revenge. Over the following weeks, Marcus visited Maria regularly. Their friendship deepened into something neither of them had expected. Maria admired Marcus's dedication to serving others and protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Marcus was inspired by Maria's strength and her determination to build a better life despite overwhelming obstacles. When Maria was released from the hospital, she discovered that her story had attracted national media attention. News outlets around the country had covered the story of the young woman who survived 4 days in the desert and whose rescue led to the capture of a criminal network. Several organizations reached out to offer Maria help. A scholarship fund was established to help her pursue her dream of becoming a nurse. A legal aid organization offered to represent her pro bono in civil suits against her brother and his accomplices. But the most meaningful support came from an unexpected source. The Navy SEAL community, led by Marcus and his team, had taken up a collection to help Maria get back on her feet. They had raised enough money to pay for her apartment, living expenses, and nursing school tuition for 2 years. "Why would you all do this for me?" Maria asked Marcus when he presented her with the check. "Because you remind us why we do what we do?" Marcus replied. "We serve to protect people like you. People who deserve better than what life has thrown at them. Your courage in that desert inspired all of us." Maria started nursing school 6 months after her rescue. She threw herself into her studies with the same determination that had kept her alive in the desert. Her professors were amazed by her work ethic and her natural compassion for patients. Marcus, meanwhile, found that his encounter with Maria had changed his own perspective on his military service. He had always been dedicated to his duty, but now he understood on a deeper level what it meant to protect and serve others. Maria's example of forgiveness and resilience became a source of strength during his own difficult deployments. 2 years after her rescue, Maria graduated from nursing school at the top of her class. Marcus, who had remained a close friend and eventually become something more, was there to watch her walk across the stage. Their relationship had grown slowly and naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values. At the graduation ceremony, Maria was asked to speak to the incoming nursing students about perseverance in the face of adversity. She told them about her 4 days in the desert, but she focused not on the horror of being abandoned, but on the lessons she had learned about the strength of the human spirit. "I learned that we are capable of far more than we think we are," she told the audience. "When everything seems impossible, when you think you can't take another step, that's exactly when you need to keep going. And I learned that there are always good people in the world who will help you if you don't give up." After the ceremony, Marcus found Maria outside the auditorium. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "I'm proud of us," Maria replied, taking his hand. "We both learned something important in that desert. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we need to be." Carlos was sentenced to 5 years in prison for kidnapping and endangering life. His 3 friends received similar sentences. Before going to prison, Carlos wrote Maria a letter begging for forgiveness and expressing his deep regret for what he had done. Maria wrote back, telling him that she forgave him but that forgiveness didn't mean there wouldn't be consequences for his actions. She encouraged him to use his time in prison to become a better person and to find a way to make amends for the harm he had caused. The criminal organization that had demanded Maria's abandonment was completely dismantled. The investigation that started with her rescue led to the recovery of millions of dollars in illegal drugs and weapons. Dozens of victims of extortion and violence finally received justice. Maria now works as a trauma nurse in Las Vegas, helping people who have experienced their own impossible situations. She often tells patients who are struggling to recover that the human body and spirit are capable of surviving things that seem unimaginable. Marcus completed several more deployments with the Navy SEALs before transitioning to a training role that allowed him to stay closer to home. He and Maria were married in a simple ceremony attended by his SEAL team and her nursing school classmates. During their wedding reception, Rodriguez, the SEAL, who had first spotted Maria in the desert, gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Most people think SEALs are tough because we can endure physical hardship," he said. But Marcus and his team learned something that day in the desert. True toughness isn't about muscles or weapons or training. It's about the strength of spirit that keeps someone walking when they have every reason to give up. Maria taught us what real courage looks like. Maria and Marcus now volunteer together with organizations that help victims of violent crime. They share their story not because it's extraordinary, but because they want people to know that survival is possible, even in the most impossible circumstances. Maria often reflects on those 4 days in the desert. The experience that was meant to destroy her instead revealed a strength she never knew she possessed. The betrayal that should have filled her with hatred instead taught her the power of forgiveness. And the rescue that saved her life also brought her a love she never expected to find. She learned that sometimes people endure the impossible not because they're superhuman, but because they refuse to accept that impossible means hopeless. Sometimes the very worst thing that can happen to someone becomes the doorway to a life they never could have imagined. In quiet moments, when Maria looks back on everything that happened, she realizes that being abandoned in the desert was simultaneously the worst and best thing that ever happened to her. It nearly killed her, but it also revealed who she truly was, and led her to a life of purpose and love she never would have found otherwise. The desert had tested her limits, and shown her that she had no limits. The experience taught her that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about refusing to let circumstances determine who you become. And sometimes, in the vast emptiness, where it seems like nothing good could possibly exist, you discover that everything you need to survive was inside you all along.